when Donald Trump makes a trade enemy of China, arguing the U.S. buys way too much from them.
Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right.
You have to consider how much of that is Americans buying clothing made in China. Estimates are about 30 to 40%. But this wasn't always the case.
Apparel used to be produced in factories in Canada or in the United States. Much of that was then offshored, especially when China joined the World Economic Council. They became part of that supply chain.
And that meant pretty quickly the U.S. got cut out. Just take a look at how many fewer Americans have jobs making clothes today compared to 30 years ago. The Trump administration's goal, of course, is to bring that golden age of American manufacturing back and to put that money back into the pockets of Americans.
If we do not protect our nation's manufacturers, we lose a fundamental part of who we are as a people.
And it is a popular idea. Americans, by and large, would rather buy stuff that's made at home. One survey showed 82% of people said they would buy more made-in-America products if they were sold more widely. But, of course, to use clothing as an example once again, there's a reason the U.S. now imports a majority of what Americans wear from Asia.
The price of clothing has gone down dramatically, and that was primarily due to the offshoring of production.
Yeah, it's just cheaper. Consider this. Say you bought a big old box of anything in 1970, and it cost you $75. Doesn't really matter what you bought, because if we take average U.S. inflation into account, buying that same box of whatever would cost you more than $600 in today's dollars. So unfair, right? But now, let's say we're talking about a 1970s coat. Same price, but 50 years later, inflation in the apparel industry is tiny compared to how much more expensive everything else has gotten. That same coat in today's dollars will cost you around $167 today.
That essentially speaks to China's overall price suppression effect by being able to provide to us low-cost apparel at a mass quantity.
So we wanted to know, can the U.S. bring something like apparel manufacturing back to America without forcing every American to break the bank? Let's go through it. So let's talk about shoes. How much it costs to make a pair and how much you can reasonably sell that pair for. What will the market bear? And we'll use a pair of Nikes made in Asia as an example. Retail price, $100. A few years ago, the head of Nike's footwear sourcing program said, on average, on that $100 pair of shoes, figure 25 of those dollars is the cost of actually making the shoe in the factory. Which makes it sound like Nike's making $75 profit on every pair of $100 shoes, which is insane, but of course, we're not done. That $25 production cost is really just the Asian factory. The material, the labor, all of it. But that's a long way from the shoe being on your foot, right? You gotta send those things across a whole ocean. Shipping and insurance, add another $1 onto the total cost. And US duties, which was pre-tariffs, about $2.50. So now we're up to around $28.50 to bring those Asian-made shoes into the United States. But then Nike has to tell people that it's got some cool new shoes, right? There's marketing, paying for operations here in North America, labor, so on and so forth. And that's a big expense. Another $15 on this particular pair of shoes. There's also taxes, because of course there's taxes. And we're now basically at just over $45. But you're still not wearing the shoes, because it's not like Nike makes most of its money selling direct to consumer. It sells mainly through stores like Foot Locker or Sports Experts, and they're gonna want their cut as well. According to Nike, a retail store might pay them around $50 for the shoes, and this is where Nike takes the money and exits the transaction, pocketing a relatively small profit of $4.50. But now, this shoe is the retailer's problem. They've got to recoup the $50 they just paid Nike and all of their other operating costs too. So that's why they're setting the price to you, the customer, at $100. But here's the kicker. According to Foot Locker's financial statements, they don't tend to sell $100 shoes for $100. They might sell that pair for closer to $60 because of all the discounts that they have to offer to actually move product before the end of the season.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff that bombs. It hits the shelf, it doesn't sell, so now it has to go on sale.
When retailers, they set up the initial price, they will already factor in how much discount they plan to offer in the future.
So all of a sudden, you've sold a $50 shoe for $60 for a measly $10 margin, and that's got to pay for your own marketing, your employees, overhead costs, and ideally, you make some kind of profit. Otherwise, why did you bother buying and selling the shoe in the first place?
Apparel is generally low margin. There just isn't a lot of wiggle room at all.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is what the market will bear. This is the low cost and the equilibrium that this one slice of the apparel industry has reached. So now let's ask Trump's question. Can all of that start and finish in America? And if so, how much more is it going to cost you? If we look at apparel manufacturing today, there are a couple of big things that China has that the US doesn't. The first is cheap labor.
If there's something very complicated, like a ski jacket that has many complicated steps, that is so labor intensive that at times it's just not possible in the US to produce such a thing and be affordable at the retail level.
Yeah, because American workers are just paid more. And that's true not just in clothing, but across all manufacturing. As of mid-2024, the average manufacturing worker in the United States earned close to $30 an hour. Compare that to under $7 an hour in China. Some of that we can attribute to much harsher and, by Western standards, unethical labor practices. But China also has a much bigger population and a massive pool of workers ready and willing to do this kind of work for $7 an hour, which, we should say, does go further than $7 would here in Canada or the United States.
On average, the cost of living in China is similar to the labor discount, anywhere from a quarter up to half of what it costs to live here in the United States.
It's a huge population, especially the industry has been going further and further into the backcountry of China, where there are millions of people who, they work in rice fields and they're being given jobs in factories.
They may not have many economic opportunities. So working in a garment factories can be a great choice or a very attractive choice to many people living there.
So how would a factory in America even begin to close that gap? Well, the Trump administration has an idea.
How can we compete with that labor? The answer is robotics are going to do it better and cheaper. And the key to robotics is going to be American AI and American intuition and the American technology.
The idea here being, if you can delegate some of the more mechanical work to robots, like Tesla's Optimus, that could improve efficiency and reduce costs, right? And according to Trump's team, this could also create new, higher-paying jobs for Americans running those robot factories.
You're going to see the greatest surge in training for what we call tradecraft, teaching people how to be robotics mechanics, engineers and electricians for high-tech factories.
Except this, too, has a cost, a big upfront cost, because they're not just talking about moving factories to the United States. They're talking about creating something better and more efficient than what China already has, and doing it from the ground up. That's not easy.
The Chinese government invests significantly in different industries. So when you look at the equipment they have there, which is, the spinning, weaving, bleaching, the cut and sew operation, it's all highly automated. So they have some very efficient processes. They're very good at producing large volumes at low cost.
In fact, in 2015, Nike actually tried to create a highly automated factory in Mexico. The goal being pretty similar, to get robots to put together the tops of its sneakers in 50 to 75 seconds, a job that would normally take a human well over 10 minutes. But less than 3 years later, it all fell apart.
It just didn't work. The cost of automation, they were trying to automate the process, the cost of labor, the learning curve, the productivity levels were not able to justify the costs of producing that shoe versus the price that they could get for it.
And even if you could get a whole slate of brand new US factories filled with robots doing all the work, experts agree they still need the materials to work with.
If I try to keep everything US made, it's almost impossible. At some level, I have to still use the thread. I still have to use the buttons or something that is produced in China.
In order for the United States manufacturing to catch up, we would have to invest in lots and lots of infrastructure in the entire apparel supply chain. In short, it's going to take billions and billions, if not tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars.
They could probably produce apparel in the United States or Canada, but it would be at least probably triple or quadruple the cost of what they can produce in Asia.
And that's where Trump's plan crashes into this wall of reality. Because are you willing to pay $400 for a $100 pair of shoes? Now, let me take one step back, because everyone we spoke to did agree there are some industries where it could make sense for the US to invest in reshoring, building weapons, or making pharmaceuticals, for example. These are very arguably issues of national security. But not every industry is like that. And the example of clothes, a source of major domestic manufacturing loss in the United States.
It is simply not feasible for America to get a lot of these jobs back.
Personally, I do not think this is a reality.
It just doesn't make sense.
The consensus is pretty clear.